Welcome everyone to the Fandom Effect podcast, a safe point during your day to hear and talk about anime, video games, comics, MMA, and a lot more. This podcast started as a way to show everyone to never be afraid to try something new, because at the end of the day, you never know what kind of impact a new idea or a new interest is going to have on you until you try. So welcome everyone to the Fandom Effect, and let's begin.
Hey everyone, this is Dungeon Master Mark, and you're listening to episode 3 of the Fandom Effect.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Fandom Effect. We have our amazing guest here this week is Dungeon Master Mark. Say hello.
Hello, happy to be here.
Yeah, it'll be pretty fun. So I know it's for those of you who are wondering, like, what the hell, like Dungeon Master Mark, like the hell is that? So why don't you give everyone a brief kind of explanation of what that actually means?
For the role-playing tabletop game of Dungeons and Dragons, game is governed by a game master or a dungeon master who sort of tells the group what's happening and makes decisions on rules and how certain things play out, and is overall the game's manager, referee. You play the villains, you play allies, and you play the referee, amongst many other things and responsibilities, but you are the glue that holds the game together. And I have been dungeon mastering now for a little over 3 years, and
so I know you know as well that I am just now recently getting into the Dungeon Master interesting world in itself, but you chose a different route than, you know, a lot of people tend to start us off as a player, and they kind of work their way into gaining the confidence of being a Dungeon Master, but you almost went from almost like a brief player to just being a straight Dungeon Master, like right out of the gate. How do you combat, you know, having to learn like that on the fly?
It's definitely a different route of learning. When you're a player, you know, you really just have to learn the rules to your character, and everything else you kind of let the Dungeon Master manage for you. And when I was starting out, I did play in a campaign with you, actually. My first time playing. We only played for about 2 months, and then unfortunately schedules didn't line up and we weren't able to continue, but I was craving that urge. I wanted to get back into it with people, so I got a group together, but no one had any experience doing it, and so I kind of was looking around. I realized if I don't step up, I don't think this is going to happen, so I begrudgingly took the role of Dungeon Master, and there were moments at the beginning where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. They're going to be like, you don't even know how to do all this, and luckily I was with a group who was very understanding, and people are grateful that you do it, and so you get a lot of encouragement. Make sure you get a group who really wants to play, and they'll encourage you to become the best you can be. Over the course of the last 3 years, I've grown to really love being a dungeon master and telling stories and helping people shape their characters and grow the personalities that they've developed in them.
So it brings me to, I guess, a follow-up point is I've done both, so I have my own takes on things, but when you're doing certain things that require more of the, you know, homebrew standpoint, you know, how do you kind of sit there and kind of figure out, okay, you know, do you take character, like, do you try to go character backstory, like, what do you try to focus on, like how the players play, you know, like, what do you try to gather to focus on to write something like out of the blue?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because I think the answer varies wildly on who you're playing with and what's happening in the game. My advice for starting out Dungeon Masters: try and run a module that's already pre-written when you start out. Don't start out homebrewing. It's a dangerous game to play, because you'll either end up giving the player something that's completely overpowered or completely underwhelming. It's best to use some structured stuff first and then pepper in your own little homebrew. I started out, my homebrew ideas were just little items and stuff that the players would find, random NPCs I would introduce, and then as the party kind of got more and more outside the box, one thing, not to go off on a tangent here, but players will always find ways to break out of whatever. You're like, okay, I've got a very linear path for them here, like, they clearly need to go to this location next. You know, as long as they're paying attention, they should go there. They will find a way to derail your campaign and take it elsewhere. And that's when it's nice to just have a little bit of homebrew that you can just pepper in to just kind of veer them back on track. and especially with a group that's new, that kind of stuff can be helpful. But as you get more and more comfortable, it's okay to let them veer off more. And so when it comes to homebrew, I just think it's do as much or as little as you feel comfortable with, but at least give yourself a little structure to start out with, so you learn the basic rules first.
Right, and so like with kind of getting into more homebrew, like burning things down, right? And
yeah, so I mean, are we going to go into this?
Yeah,
you are in the game that I run, and I am in the game that you run as a player, which is a nice opportunity for me because I don't frequently get to play the characters that I create in my head. I have a list of about 5 or 6 characters that I don't that I haven't had a chance to play. But what's interesting is that I get to see it from both sides, because I have definitely had it where you or another person in the party of the game you play in have done something that I was not expecting, and I had to real quick scramble and be like, okay, this happens. But I've also been that player who's done things. We actually played last night, and you had all of these encounters lined up for us. And one of them was with a gelatinous cube, which is not a very smart creature, and I was able to outsmart it with an invisible wall an imaginary wall that I threw up using illusion spell. And you had to kind of just figure out, okay, well, now what? And that's I think the beauty of Dungeons and Dragons is a video game can just throw up an invisible wall for you and tell you, nope, you can't do that. You can't go this way. And with the human element of tabletop games is that you can literally do anything. If you've got a good dungeon master who can think on the fly, they can really send you off on some crazy different thing that you weren't expecting.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing when it comes to starting off in Dungeons and Dragons is, regardless of whether you're a player or a dungeon master, you need to have that, adaptability, because even as a player standpoint, there's been plenty of times where, you'll sit there as a player and something is happening, or the dungeon master switches gears, and you might have had a plan of what you felt like doing, or a path you were going to take your character down, but you have to also, as a player, be adjustable on the fly. Especially, depending on classes, and I think that's another thing I don't know about you, but for newer players, I have my own thought on it, but I want to get your opinion first. As if you're it's a newer player to D&D, or someone who maybe is nervous to get started and they finally found a group or something like that, is there a class that you would say avoid if it's your very first time as a player?
I never want to tell anyone no, because if someone's got passion run in as a cleric or a wizard or some class that people consider complicated, a good dungeon master can help guide them through that. And so I never want to discourage someone from I never want to be the guy who's like, well, you're new, so play a fighter. I think that really ruined the game for someone. I know, me personally, I think I'm not saying that they're bad, but for me, I do not prefer up close and personal fighter characters. I'm not a big fan of fighters. I'm not a big fan of barbarians. Paladins don't really do much for me. I'm very much more into the role play of the game, which is nice as a dungeon master because I get to do a lot of it. But I would just tell you that there are certain classes that will be more challenging, but the challenge is directly proportional to the rewarding nature of it. And just look at all the classes. There's only 12 of them. Read up about them and pick the one that speaks to you. If I may break into a little story here, started playing Dungeons & Dragons. Most people get the idea that D&D is a boys' club and only guys play with the occasional girl. My girlfriend is actually the reason I started playing. She was she'd been playing almost her whole life. Her dad taught her how to play. And so when we started dating and she was telling me these stories about the game, I reached out to you and I was like, we should do this. We've been talking about it for so long, but now I really want to do it. So she was helping me build my first character. And she's like, okay, read through the player's handbook here and read all the classes and see what you like. And so it goes alphabetically, and it starts barbarian, and then bard, and cleric, druid. And as I'm going through this, I'm like, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting. Okay, maybe that one. I don't know. And then I got to Rogue, and I read up about it. It was like, opportunist, uses a lot of strategy and traps to their advantage. And I was like, that is the one. And there was, it was an immediate connection for me. And I don't think I would have had a great experience if someone had been, not that rogues are hard to play, but if someone had said, no, don't pick that one, be this. And then if once you have a feel for it, then play this. I think the fact that you can be anything is a draw to the game. So just play whatever you want, but understand that some classes are more difficult than others, but you'll find it most rewarding if you play what speaks to you. Yeah,
and I've, throughout my playing days, like you brought it up earlier, and this is my first time DMing in the campaign that we're in, and of course I went to super duper homebrew, which has been fun. But before that, I had been playing D&D as a player for I'm gonna make myself feel super old here, but 15 years.
Yeah, you have a lot more history on this than I do in terms of the game, but I think you learn a lot faster as a dungeon master because you're forced to. If you have a wizard, a cleric, a fighter, a rogue, and a druid on the team, you have to learn those 5 classes.
Oh yeah, and I think for me that's what led to in the next campaign wanting to play this samurai fighter. Is I had to research so many different classes as a dungeon master, not just for what you guys were playing, but for what potential NPCs could be. I had to make sure I knew that class as well, and I had never, like what you're saying earlier, I had never really played an up close and personal class. I've played Rangers, I've played Druids, I've played Sorcerers, I've played a Wanti, Assassin, and then now I'm playing a Fire, a Genesi, which is a very fun class, for a newer player that maybe wants a newer class that's slightly off the beaten path a little bit. I would actually recommend some form of Genesi. They have some pretty cool racial abilities. Their bonuses are pretty good. Every one of them gets like some sort of default like class spell of some sort. So the lore alone, if you're kind of, if fantasy's been something that's been interested to you, if you're listening to this and you like reading certain books on, like Baldur's Gate or like the Drizzt series or like authors like R.A. Salvatore or something like that, you'll probably be someone who's very much into the lore of Dungeons and Dragons and specific classes. And so I think if you're doing something like that, you almost want to focus on, I don't know about you, but, do you think you would want to do you think the lore of a class or a group plays into it?
Yeah, I have a friend who is a big fan of Indiana Jones, and so probably to an annoying level, the kind of person who will just tell anyone who will listen how great Dungeons and Dragons is. And so she heard me talk about it enough that she was like, okay, well, I'll give it a try. And so I was explaining all the classes to her and doing my best to not overwhelm her. I just asked her, who are some of your favorite, like, from anything? It can be from fantasy, from sci-fi, whatever. And she's a big Harrison Ford fan, so she said Han Solo and Indiana Jones. And those two characters just immediately called rogue to mind. You've got a treasure hunter, archaeologist, and you've got a scoundrel who can talk his way out of anything. And I said, those are two characteristics that immediately land on rogue. So if those are the characters that you like, that a rogue might be what speaks to you. If you would rather be more of, if you're more of a fan of like Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones, maybe a fighter is more your way. So I do think that asking yourself those questions and thinking about those characters can help you pick your class. What also works for me is that when I play games like Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, I was always the character who put all my stats into charisma so I could talk my way out of situations and bluff people into giving me things and just basically lie my way out of any situation. And so those kinds of kind of finding the what my friend calls it as a slithering mentality, and using my cunning more than my strength is always the way I've liked to play things.
Oh yeah, and so we'll get back to Dungeons and Dragons, but you said two magic, well, more than two, but you said magic words, so I feel like it's worthy of a discussion. But you said the words Knights of the Old Republic,
Yes.
which still today is one of the most fun games I've ever played, and in fact, so much fun that I've rebought the first two games on Steam, but I never beat the second one. I know there's some flack on the second one. I haven't played in a while, but I'm like halfway through it. So first question is, did you beat both, or are we talking first one?
I think I beat the first one when I was younger. A friend of mine let me borrow his Xbox, and I definitely remember beating it because I remember the end. I don't want to spoil anything for a game that's 15, 20 years old, but I did beat that one. I never actually played the second one because he didn't own it, and until it came out on Steam, I never had a system that could play it. I was a Nintendo kid. I grew up with Nintendo systems, and so I did buy it on Steam. But my plan was to replay the first one before I jumped into it, and life and other things came up, and I just never got around to it.
Yeah, so I to that point, I can speak on it a little bit. Is even though I haven't beaten it, I can definitely say that the second game so far, you could tell they tried to capture the essence of what the first one was, but they definitely introduced a few elements that just almost take you out of the game a little bit. What I mean by that is, so in the first one, it was very make your decisions, you got good or you got bad. Mm-hmm. And
yep.
It was generally about it. So in the second one, they almost changed it to where that's still a thing. Like, there's still options in a discussion where you'll get good, good points and you'll get bad points. But now, whoever you have in your individual party either will like you more or like you less, depending on the choice that you make, which sounds good, but they do it in a way where it's almost like the most minor thing in a conversation. Like, you won't even say something that evil to someone, just kind of like a dick, but not even like a huge dick, like a medium dick. And also it'll show you, like, this party member has lost 10 persuasion points with you, and it was like, it takes you out of the game enough where you're like, well, great, now I have to sit there and second guess every single talking decision. So I felt like that's a good idea, but I feel like when it nitpicks that much, it almost sucks you out of the game.
So when you say like a medium dick, you mean like 2 inches, right?
Oh yeah, just the tip. Yeah.
Games like that let me kind of sweet talk my way to what I want, and so when I saw that that was an option in Knights of the Old Republic, I immediately went and restarted the game and made the character that I wanted that could do that. And that was actually how I learned about the stats that come into play in Dungeons and Dragons, because they use the same system. It's actually based off of the Baldur's Gate engine, so which is another one that I've just recently played for the first time. A lot of these games that are based off D&D, Neverwinter Nights and whatnot, have become games that I've discovered for the first time now that I've gotten into playing D&D.
Right, and it's actually kind of funny. So, are you talking about like the PC Baldur's Gate or the PlayStation 2 Baldur's Gate?
I'm actually playing on the Switch.
Oh, nice. So, the one that came out for the PS2, straight Baldur's Gate, very fun game. So, for anyone out there that still has somehow a working, I know I have a working PS2, but for anyone out there that does have a working PS2, Baldur's Gate's a relatively cheaper game to get. It's very fun. You only can pick 3 classes: a archer, a mage, and a dwarf warrior. So they have 3 choices. It's a very cut and dry, almost plays like a platformer in a way where you generally only have one path to go to. Like, you can go back and forth, but you're not going to be able to go on a side tangent. It's a very linear game, but still one of my favorite Baldur's Gate games. I grew up playing that game, and it has one of my favorite glitches to date. That's still it's so much fun. it has a glitch where, because of course, as I'm sure as you're aware, it's one of those games where if you want to purchase, the rarest item or weapon, like besides getting some rare stuff in a drop, the shop's generally going to have. This is a game where the shop actually has the best items, but they're very expensive.
Of course.
So the fun glitch in the Baldur's 2 game is you would take all your armor, all your weapons, you would drop them. So you would save the game, you would drop all your stuff, and then you would reload the game, and all your stuff would be on the ground, and you would be wearing it.
So you could just clone it and resell it over and over again.
Exactly. So for anyone out there, for everyone listening, if you have a PS2 and you're willing to spend, I think it's like $15-20 for an old copy of Baldur's Gate, which is worth it in my opinion. It's just such an easy, fun glitch. I mean, beat the game by itself normal, and then do the glitch to just blast your way through everyone with relatively no effort at all.
So if I might turn the tables and ask you a question, I've talked about what class immediately spoke to me when you first played Dungeons and Dragons, which you said it's been about 15 years. So you were probably playing in 4th edition, maybe 3rd, 3.5.
Third. Started with third.
Third. So what class spoke to you? What was the thing that drew you in immediately?
That's a good question. Oddly enough, it's a class that I never really got to play that much, but the first thing that spoke to me was Ranger.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always been a very huge Lord of the Rings fan, and Legolas, it was always like my favorite person in Lord of the Rings. When I used to play RuneScape back in the day, my character's name was TT Legolas for Two Towers, because that's how cool I was in middle school.
Yeah, everyone was.
But yeah, it was. I remember reading the 3rd edition book in Ranger. It was like, hey, you can, by default, you can dual wield, dual wielding's always been like, I've always loved dual wielding stuff. And it was like, yeah, and you can use bows and arrows, and you can have an animal companion that can like fight with you and stuff. Like, it was always a class early on that like really, really spoke to me. And I never really got a chance to play a Ranger in the earlier editions, and now they've made enough changes to the Ranger where it's not really appealing to me anymore. But 3rd edition Ranger was what really kind of sparked that immediate interest with playing it in my friend's basement with like to the video that we always quote in our sessions, which for the Dungeons and Dragons fans out there that are listening will know what the phrase "attack the darkness" is from.
Yeah, with Magic Missile.
Yeah, and literally growing up, that scene was what growing up playing was. It was me and a few friends in a buddy's basement down the street, sitting around a table with maps and character sheets and cans of Mountain Dew and chips. Like, that's literally what I grew up playing.
You just described the stereotype. Way to just drive that point. What you were saying, though, about how they've changed Rangers, I was with you because I was looking at Beastmaster Rangers at one point, because they are, like I said, the classes are alphabetical, and so Ranger was the last thing I saw before I saw Rogue, and I was looking at Beastmaster, and it was like, you have to, as an action, so for those who don't understand how the game works, you get one action on your turn, and so you could attack, or you could send your animal to attack. And that sending my animal to attack just seemed like a waste of a turn. So they actually have an unofficial, it might be official now, but an unofficial expansion or rather modification to the Ranger class that fixes a lot of the problems people are complaining about. So you should look into that if you ever want to play it. Maybe I could run a one-off. You can give that a try.
Yeah, that's I'll have to definitely look into that, because I feel like for, I guess, to answer my own question from earlier, if for someone who's new in playing, if you can find a way to make a Ranger class work, that is a middle ground class to kind of get you experience in some spell casting, some ranged combat, but also still have the ability to defend yourself. Because I know I had always been interested in playing sorcerers, and I've had a chance to play sorcerers now. Is you almost sometimes get too overzealous with how powerful your spells are.
Yeah, like lighting everything on fire.
Yeah, like who would just suddenly light everything on fire? Like, I don't know, if you were on like a wooden ship.
Yeah, what Mark and I are referring to is in the game that he is DMing that I'm playing in, our sorcerer is notorious for lighting everything on fire, even when we're on a ship that's completely made of wood. And we almost got everyone killed.
Oh yeah. Session 4.
Yeah, it was pretty early in the campaign. We've been playing for about 6 months now in this game. The problem is that because I get to play so rarely, this character that I'm playing right now, I grow very attached to. And I'm very afraid of him dying because
you almost did. You came very close to dying a session ago.
I did, and I wanted to. There's a bit of a stereotype with certain races in D&D that barbarians are all meatheads, rogues are all angsty, wizards are all weaklings. So I wanted to kind of break out of that. So I play Isaac, the tiefling rogue, who speaks a little bit like this, and inspired by a lot of things. He does have that darker aspects of a rogue, but very much play him a little bit like a bard, in that he's a little bit loud and outspoken. But I very much like to play characters outside of the norm of what you'd expect for them. With you, my favorite race in D&D is tieflings. I just think they're cool looking, with the horns, and they have cool abilities and whatnot. What is your favorite race to play?
I guess it depends. I've obviously, I've played it. I'm playing a tiefling right now. I don't really lead into it, but Genesi was something that I just randomly discovered. But honestly enough, it's actually probably going to be something, a class that I've never played, but Drow has always been super interesting.
Yeah, in our game that you're running, my girlfriend plays a Drow. She has a blast with it, and this is just to get into some more homebrew stuff. I'm in the process now of working on a homebrew game that's going to use the classes and combat system from 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, but it's going to be set in the world of and use the races from The Legend of Zelda. And so my girlfriend wants to play a Twilight, like from Twilight Princess, and we're going to be basing it off the Drow class. So she's going to get to sink her teeth into it again. When it comes down to Dungeons & Dragons, my feeling is if you've had even the slightest interest of just seeing, like, what's this about? Just sit down, give it a try, and I think you'll find it's one of the most fun experiences you'll ever have. And if you go in cynical, like, oh, this is going to be boring and everything, and you don't really get into it, then you probably are dooming yourself from the start. So you really got to commit to saying, this is something I at least want to give it on this try. Right.
And yeah, it does bring up another good point. So for those of you who are out there that are, contemplating different things in D&D, we've both have played different aspects of both in person and online. Obviously, with today's world, online's probably a bigger thing. Yes, for those of you who have listened to the first 2 episodes, even though it's been a month and a half, we're still under quarantine.
Yeah. Actually, now is kind of the best time to get into Dungeons and Dragons because no one has any plans.
Yeah.
So it's actually very easy to play right now, and no one has an excuse of like, oh, I'm meeting with my family tonight. It's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, no.
You're stuck inside like that.
Which brings up a good point. Let's, two kind of questions on that kind of topic.
Okay.
First one being, let's say nothing was going on, everything was hunky-dory and super rainbows and sunshine and, sprinkles. And someone is thinking of getting into D&D, or perhaps, getting nervous about getting into D&D, scared about stigmas. We know how it is. We grew up with a lot of things that was, like a lot of things are more socially acceptable now than they were then when we were growing up.
I don't know what you're talking about. Nerds have never been made fun of.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, never at all. So let's say someone is kind of contemplating it, they're nervous about it, they want to get into it. Obviously there's different ways to go to your local shops. A lot of local card stores and comic book shops actually will run their own D&D nights. But my question is, for a newer player, someone who's maybe trying to get their feet wet, do you recommend trying to find a group of players who can play and meet up somewhere, or do you think maybe trying the Roll20, which is the website used for online D&D, is perhaps the way to go? Because there's you can join random groups on Roll20 that are from people all over the internet that you've never met. What do you think is the best route for like a potential newer player to try to get their feet wet?
I think first thing you should do is I understand with the way the world is, like, Roll20 is a great tool, but I do think that you do lose something with having the in-person game. So if Roll20 is your only option, by no means saying don't do it. But I would encourage people to try and find a group that they can meet with in person. If with how popular 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons has become, I would say you're hard pressed to find anyone who doesn't know a single person who plays. So if you've got Facebook or Twitter or whatever, just throw it out there to people and be like, hey, does anyone play this? I'd like to maybe give it a go. And if the person who responds to that really wants you to play, they'd probably be willing to dungeon master you, at least for a quick one-off in person, just so you can sample it. And then if you feel like, okay, that was great, I want more, then I think you can pursue more in Roll20. But I do think you want your first experience to be in person, because you get a lot from that.
No, yeah, you definitely do this. So, I still have plenty of memories of playing in person that are just, I would not trade for anything. So I know obviously we're at D&D is on 5th edition right now. There's been a lot of beginning rumors that Wizards of the Coast is working on 6th edition. If you had to think of, like, let's just say top 3 changes, whether it's a class or to a rule or to really anything in general, what would you say as a DM and a player would be 3 things you'd like to see improved upon, changed, or brand new with 6th edition?
This is a really interesting question, because 5th edition is so customizable that, like, there's already homebrew rules that are pretty much used by everyone except the people who are most hardcore to follow the rules. Like, being able to drink a potion as a bonus action is one that a lot of DMs do, even though it's technically considered an action. So I could see them changing the certain actions being allowed as bonus action. But if I knew, I would be working for them. I don't know. I think it's hard for me to say, because I'm really only familiar with 5th edition and 3.5. I wish I had this long historical background where I'd be like, I played 1st edition. So it's really hard for me to say, but the game is so open that even if they change something and people don't like it, they can still go back and play 5th edition. There's still groups out there playing 3.5, and those people got run over to Pathfinder, which is like a branch off of 3.5. I think if they change anything, it's just going to be to try to make the game even more approachable. 5th edition is the most approachable edition that they've had so far. It's very easy to pick up, very easy to understand, and if they do anything, they're just going to try and make it even more easy to understand, easy to get started.
Right, yeah, and it is a good point. Like, even I really can't think of anything that off the top that I would, say, like, oh, that would be a great change, or, oh, you should introduce this, because, like you said, the game has evolved to the point enough to where, okay, like, if you see...
Not to put you under pressure, but can you just, real quick, just completely reinvent the Dragons game?
Yeah, no pressure, but come up with a new idea, and then I'll just, since I own all the rights to everything here, I can just go ahead and steal it. And make millions off of your ideas. So, make sure you give me as many as you can think of.
I'm your think tank.
Just a cheap version of Shark Tank, but in this case, I don't pay you. You just give me the ideas, and then I take them and make money off of them.
Yeah, I can see that. So go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it'll totally work. So I mean, I definitely think D&D has, is revolutionary in what it is, and it has evolved to the point where, like you said, it really, you can play any race or class you can think of, depending on your DM. I know I've heard horror stories, I've watched videos of this, there's a YouTuber called the DM Layer, where I'm
very familiar.
Yeah, I love his stuff. And I know I've watched a lot of his videos where he's gone over, like, horror stories and stuff like that, and there's a few Reddits that I belong to for, like, people sharing D&D stories, and you see stuff all the time where players will talk about how bad their DM is, or, like, how they joined a campaign and their character died in 30 minutes. Like, there's stories on all ends of the spectrum.
And
Yeah. Well, you've also been in a situation where you were, killed by a party member who shall remain nameless.
Yeah, that's true.
Thunder waved you into a wall.
Yeah.
That was fun.
That
I was just going to say, like, to the point where you were kind of making is, as long as you have a DM who's more, willing to, bend certain rules, there's really no limit to what you can do.
And that's actually the last thing I'll say in terms of being a DM is don't just look up the rules for the game, look up the rules for improv, because improvisation comes into play so much when you're a dungeon master, because you will sit there and be like, okay, there's going to be a switch here on the wall, and then a sign that says don't press the switch or you'll die, and you're going to have a player who's going to be like, yeah, I'm going to pull the switch, and you're like, well, shit, now I got to come up with something. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but you can believe it if you need to.
Oh yeah, no, you can feel free to swear as much as you want. Everyone has so far.
Okay, that you'll always have a player who you'll think, okay, they're going to understand very clearly what they have to do, and then something's going to go veer way left, and you're going to have to real quick just throw something together and be like, yeah, I planned it that way the whole time. An interesting example is right now in the game that you're playing that I'm DMing, we're playing through Storm King's Thunder. We're actually almost done with it, and you guys decided very early on in the game that you were going to go and try and hide the boat. Now, if anyone who has played Storm King's Thunder already knows where this is going, there is a boat that you have to go on really late in the campaign, like when you're like level 9. Party decided to go when they were like level 6. Not only did they completely throw the campaign off the rails, they crashed the damn boat into the dock in the town, and then ended up getting the guy who owned it killed. And so instead of interrogating him 3 chapters later in the campaign, they had to go dig up his corpse later. And so stuff like that, I had to go into the book and write notes and scribble out, be like, okay, I can't do this because this already happened. And so when you're a DM, you can't avoid the cutscene. You never want a player to be like, I want to go do this. And you're like, no, you can't do that right now. You should always follow up every player's request with yes, and unless it's something that obviously breaks the rules. But from a narrative standpoint, you never want to tell a player they can't do something.
Right, which I think it's a good kind of point to end our kind of D&D for right now. I know we're going to bring it back up, but it's definitely a good advice for not only being a player but for being a dungeon master. But the last thing I'll kind of give on my advice for everyone out there is if you are a player and your DM is being overall pretty understanding with letting you do certain things, do the same thing. Don't go into a random town and be like, I'm going to go stab that person in front of the guard. Like, okay,
you can do that.
Yeah, you can, but then when your DM has you arrested and your character's thrown in jail, don't get pissed off about it.
Players always think there's no repercussions, but you always have little strings you're pulling in the background to pay them back for it. I mean, our party went and the party that you're playing in is wanted in 3 cities right now because of accidentally setting a building on fire and getting chased off by demons. It makes more sense in context, I assure you, but the biggest thing is that the party was like, yeah, we'll just stroll back into town. I'm like, that's not going to work. Sure enough, they ended up finding wanted posters for themselves and getting chased out of town.
That's always fun. There's been a lot of things that we've done in the past. There was one in particular I wanted to bring up just from a standpoint of a lot of people do tend to do this, but also bringing up a worthy cause is we've done a few 24-hour live streams.
24-hour video game live streams for charity. Back in the day, when I was younger and more, I guess I've always been a creative person. I think being a dungeon master lets me let a lot of that out. But at one point, our creative outlet was we were working on a YouTube channel together called Save Point Studios that never really took off because I think the passion was there, but we didn't have the know-how of how to do things. And as I've gotten older, that my passions have changed. So we've never really gone back to that. But part of that was we did do some live streams for charity where we streamed us just playing a bunch of video games for 24 hours. So yeah, that was I assume you actually had a question about it.
I meant to write it, but I couldn't remember it. Do you remember the company name?
Child's was the for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Child's Play is the name of the charity. They donate games and toys, and it started with just video games, but eventually evolved into toys and board games and whatnot that kids in hospitals can have, so that when they're in there for the long term, that they don't just have to stare at four walls. And so what the service does is essentially buy those things for hospitals to have for those kids that are stuck in there.
Yeah, that was one thing I always really enjoyed doing, and posting some other stuff. I will be posting the link to Child's Play, just because I know people still tend to do that every once in a while. I'm too old now to do a 24-hour live stream, especially with a 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, even doing it when we did it, which was 5 or 6 years ago now, maybe a little after that, 3 or 4 years ago. Even then, it was tough. Like you might sit there and say, I could play video games for 24 hours. You really won't be able to when you need to. It's rough.
It's a lot different when it's 5 PM and everyone's there. You're eating pizza, and goofing off. And
but it's more than that, because you can play video games for 24 hours maybe, but can you be entertaining while playing video games instead of just sitting back on the couch in complete silence, just zoned into the game?
No, yeah, but it's like, for anyone out there that doesn't, or hears about this and thinks like, oh, that'd be something fun to do, just obviously be prepared. When it's, like I said, when it's middle of the afternoon and there's a ton of people in the Twitch or in the Child's Play, and there's people talking and donating, it's you're very engaged, entertaining. But when it's 2 AM and there's 0 people or 1 person that's watching you play some random horror game or some random 16-bit arcade game at 3 AM or something like that, you're very like, oh my god, like. But when you see the donations coming in, it definitely always brought a smile to my face that we were able to, as exhausting as it was, at least help out some kid somewhere.
Yeah, we got 500 on that last one, which was, for what was essentially just a couple friends with big dreams and low viewer count, it was pretty inspiring to see everyone come together, and we made 500 for that.
One thing we did, which I thought was a great thing that we did the second time, is we did like that wheel. If you donated, we'd spin the wheel.
Yeah, the wheel. That wheel caused kinds of problems because it landed on, like, the person playing would have to eat a hot pepper, and the person who was playing had some health issues that didn't allow him to do that. So I volunteered to step up, since I didn't want to just have to be like, oh, we can't do it, respin. And I am not a hot food person, and so eating a habanero was honestly one of the worst experiences of my life. But I did it.
Yeah, it was. I'm not a spicy person, but that was definitely just a ton of fun being able to do something like that, and that's why I'm definitely going to post a link, because I'd highly encourage other people to do it. You're not only helping someone out, but it's also, just as exhausting as it was, overall those are good memories of setting things up and playing games and goofing off, and
it's a great excuse just to get you and your friends together to have some fun playing games. It's like, well, we could just get together and play games, or we could do it for a good cause.
Yeah, and so I definitely want to encourage everyone out there to go ahead and give it a shot. Be careful with it and safe. Obviously, don't do it now.
Yes, give yourself some time for it. That's the other thing that I would tell people is, don't just think, oh yeah, I can just set this up to stream and do it. It took a lot of planning to get those going. That's part of the reason we haven't done it in the past 2 years, is just the amount of time commitment going into it is insane. But it's so rewarding when you get, when you see that, like you said, that donation counter going up, and you're like, you know what, we're helping people. Like, maybe we only make a drop in the bucket in how much they get donated every year, but we still contribute, and that feels really good.
No, yeah, definitely. It was always a lot of fun, and yeah, definitely to your point with structuring it, which I feel like it, obviously with a lot of things of being, it's oddly enough, most of the stuff that you get into being a nerd or a geek requires a lot of preparation, effort, and commitment of getting it figured out.
Yeah, like dungeon mastering. Don't ever expect to just sit down at a table and be like, all right, we're just going to wing it. You need to prep.
Yeah, no, and that's why every once in a while, even, myself, as a dungeon master, I have to take a week or, a week or two off, because you get to that point where, you get to a point where you become so proud of what you're putting into it that if you feel like a session's coming up and you're not as prepared as you want, you almost gain that passion and proudness of your campaign, where you don't want to waste the time doing a session that would be like half-assed.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say with the live stream, it's rewarding, and I definitely say if you have the means to do one, it's honestly one of the greatest experiences you can do if you have just a small group of friends who are willing to help you out with it. It's one of the most fun things you can ever do. Oh
yeah, no, very, very easily, and this isn't so much of a great tangent or a side transfer, because there's no easy way to jump to some things. We both have, obviously, in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, and we were talking about some of the games involved in Dungeons and Dragons earlier. Games have obviously vastly evolved in the last 10, 15 years. What to you now is like the games that you look for versus, that old school, that old school mentality. Obviously, the games today are vastly different. What to you is kind of that. What do you look for today, I guess?
So I'm actually at a point in my life where indie games have really taken a strong hold on the things that I like. Not to say that I don't play AAA titles, but a lot of AAA titles have gotten kind of stuck into more about making the money and which I understand their businesses, but when companies try to nickel and dime you for an experience that you played a more complete version 10 years ago when the first game came out, it's a little disheartening. So when like a game that I really loved was the original Roller Coaster Tycoon. And I didn't play the second one. Played a little bit of the third one. I was starting to feel like this doesn't really feel like the same game. And by the time the fourth one came out, it was terrible. And so I was a little disenchanted by that franchise. But then I found a indie game called Parkitect, which was really heavily inspired by the first two games of the Roller Coaster Tycoon franchise. And so it's really nice when you see indie developers stepping up to fill that void, where they clearly see that people want that older experience and just updated. And so seeing games like that, like Stardew Valley is another great one. Seeing indie developers step up and fill that void. But so I've been playing a lot of Stardew Valley. I just got the new Animal Crossing with everyone other except you.
Yeah, except me.
And I've been playing that. My girlfriend and I just started playing Diablo 3 together, but I've always been games have always been a huge part of my life, and I think they were the gateway to everything else that is nerdy that I do. Anime, Dungeons and Dragons, even just the kinds of things I'm interested, like reading sci-fi and watching superhero movies and whatnot. All of that, I think, stemmed from the fantasy of video games, of just being able to just step into another world and do anything.
Yeah, and that's a really good sentiment, and brings me to probably a really good question. Is I had told you earlier what the idea behind the Fandom effect is, and I've mentioned it to everyone before. So when you mentioned video games being the catalyst, what was that thing in your life where you decided to finally start playing video games? Because we all have that moment, but for everyone out there that maybe it's not video games, maybe it's just something in general. What was that moment, and then how do you kind of take yourself and push through that moment versus letting the stigmas or the weight of getting into something new overwhelm you?
I honestly can't answer that question because I've been playing games for as long as I can literally remember. But I can tell you a little story here is that when I had to have been only 3 or 4 years old. I was very young, and my family had just moved into the house that I lived in most of my life, and our basement was only set up by these rickety wooden stairs that led down to it. And my parents kept trying to get me to go down there, but I was too afraid that the stairs were not stable enough. I don't know why, as a kid, I was so concerned about structural integrity, but I refused to go down there. And so my parents knew that something that would get me down there is my Nintendo. I owned an original Nintendo. It was the only system I owned until the Nintendo 64, barring like a Game Boy. And so they took that Nintendo, put it in the basement and told me, well, if you're going to want to play it, you're going to have to go downstairs. And so I braved those stairs to get down there and play my Nintendo. And I've just, like I said, I've been playing them literally as long as I can remember.
Yeah, and, you know, I understand that, like, I try to, you know, with every guest on the Fandom Effect, I always try to push for, you know, these catalyst type events, you know, to help out someone.
Okay, let me address this. Going back to Dungeons and Dragons, the catalyst for me was there was a thing that I wanted to do, and I reached out to other people who all wanted to do it, but we realized there was an obstacle. We didn't have a dungeon master. And so what it really came down to is I sat there weighing the options. I was like, well, I can either do this, I can be the dungeon master with no experience and just kind of do my best to struggle through it and offer everyone the experience that they clearly want, or we don't do it at all. And so I've always been kind of a people pleaser. I like to do what I can to make others happy. And I was like, well, clearly they want this, and I'm hoping I'll get something out of it too, because if we don't do it, it's not going to happen. So I said, okay, I'm just going to try it. If I'm terrible at it, then at least I tried, and at least I know that I put my best foot forward. And so if you're afraid of trying, you know, let's say you've got a significant other who's a gamer and you don't really play it, and you're afraid of them judging you, or if you want to play D&D or be a dungeon master and you've never done it before, surround yourself with people who want the same things that you do out of the experience, because those people, if they really are genuine and want the same things that you do out of it, they're going to encourage you in order to keep that thing happening. So that would be my advice to anyone who's worried about getting into something new.
That's a really good answer, and you know, I think that encompasses a great point in just that, you know, regardless of what it is, you know, to always kind of keep putting, you know, one foot in front of the other, and that's, you know, that's why I'm doing this. That's why I reach out to people. You know, like I said, obviously kind of similar to you in terms of video games. It was a very early thing. You know, playing the Atari in my dad's lap. You know, beating River Raid. You know, for that fun throwback, and just like old school game systems, and just growing up with that mentality. But you know, I did have things like, really good point that I remembered out of the top of my head, and I wanted for kind of a fandom in general is Doctor Who. So as you know, when we first met, I was very against Doctor Who.
Yep.
Did not want to watch it. Didn't think I would like it. Was very like, I don't know. Like, I don't really want to think I want to get into it. And, you know, not really necessarily you know, I wasn't scared of getting into it, but I was definitely preventing myself from getting into the series. So how would you like to tell everyone how you turned me into a Doctor Who fanatic?
I mean, I think I just showed you the episode Blink, which a lot of Whovians will tell you is arguably the best episode to, like, get someone, just give them a taste of, like, what the show is about, because it's not only a very good episode and well written, it explains a lot of the lore, because it follows a character that is, it sort of follows a guest main character, and so you get a lot of the stuff about the show explained to you within that one self-contained episode. So there isn't a lot of, who's that? What's going on here? What's going with that? So I think that's just a perfect episode to show someone if anyone's rolling their eyes at Doctor Who.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I'm really behind. I'm like 2 seasons behind now, but I plan on catching up. Our last guest on episode 2, you guys can go back and listen to it, gives some great tips on where to watch Doctor Who right now, and not, you know, steal it as much as we tend to steal everything these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just, that is a story I wanted to make sure I brought up, because it just goes to show you, you know, for those of you that are listening right now, is, like you said, maybe rolling your eyes at Doctor Who, or perhaps there's a friend that's been, you know, bugging you to watch some TV show, or, you know, bugging you to watch something else. Is, at the end of the day, you never know. And, you know, if there's a day coming up and you have an hour you can spare to just finally go ahead and give something a shot, you know, if you don't like it, you know, hey, you know what, you didn't like it, but you don't know what that, choosing that 1 hour to get into something could just change. Like, you know, like you said, you know, getting into video games early on was a catalyst to all these things. You just don't know at the end of the day what giving an hour of your day to something can jump you into down the road. And, I really just want to, like I said, encourage everyone out there to just always keep pushing, get one foot in front of the other, just, really never stop getting what you need to. We have a lot of great stuff. Now, I know we talk about this with I'll be making sure, like, your Twitter is what I'll be posting, correct?
Yep. My Twitter is at Kazman2007, KAZMAN2007. I don't tweet a lot. In fact, right now it's sort of become my dumping ground for Nintendo Switch photos that I want to share. But I do respond to messages and such on there. So if anyone wants to ask me questions about D&D or how to get started or anything, obviously we only have so much to talk about in an hour, or so much that we can talk about in an hour. But I'm more than willing to answer more questions about D&D or anything. So.
Yeah, I'll definitely make sure that that goes out there. And yeah, I know it's always a fun thing. I always try to tell everyone, like, a lot of guests that are in the Fan Effect will be repeat guests, because there's always just so much to talk about and so much to go over, especially with what I've learned about teaching myself audio editing, which is, again, kind of goes into everything, is, wanting to restarting podcasts, but realizing, when I did podcasting before under Popluck, for those of you that have been following my work for a while now, our other two members, primarily Andrew, was the one who did a lot of the audio editing, and then, Save Point Studios, we had a video editor. And when I got into it, I realized, well, if I'm going to start podcasting again, I have to learn how to audio edit. I need to learn audio settings. What do these effects do? How do I change audio, up and down? How do I do this? How do I do that? So I bought a course on, as you listen to episode 1, the tip of episode 1 was a education learning site, Udemy, that I use for quite a lot of things, and audio editing being one of them. So right now I'm just sticking with Audacity because it's simple. I need to learn the basics, and then I'm going to be moving on to Adobe Audition. But so it's, getting into just one thing again I've had to learn audio editing. Learning Photoshop and graphic design work has been coming into play, and stuff just kind of tends to cascade. And so again, that's why I always try to encourage everyone to get into everything, is you just don't know, and plus it's just tons of fun doing this with you guys. I always have a huge blast recording these episodes with everyone. So I'll let you do it as well. I mentioned it earlier, but for everyone who does make it to the end, you're probably very familiar at this point. I always keep forgetting to mention it at the very, very beginning of the podcast, but at the very end of the podcast, I always talk about what the tip of the episode is going to be. The fandom advice of the week, so to speak. I got to come up with a better name for this.
We can workshop it.
Yeah, we got to workshop it. But it's always a variety of things, and it can, the tip of the episode when we workshop a better name. But the idea is it's either something that I know or something that I've read about, whether it's an education website, whether it's, last week I mentioned Audacity and Unreal Engine 4 as free game development things to use. So I try to find something that whether it's free or something cheap or something to help everyone out there that's thinking of getting into something and providing a tool or an option of something to do it. So it could be anything. It could be a YouTuber, who knows? So this one, it's a little bit random, but I wanted to focus on the world of MMOs. So I know we both have dabbled quite a lot of MMOs. I actually just recently, I quit, but I just recently quit WoW Classic, but I had gotten back into it. I got my first character to 60, and then there's just no time to play anymore. A lot of things that I've heard from friends and people is just, well, dude, I don't want to pay WoW or Star Wars or any of this. I don't want to pay them $15 a month. Like, I would love to play, but I can't, I can't afford $15 a month. I totally understand that. So what I want to do this week is showcase very old MMO, RuneScape, from back in the day, that actually has made a resurgence in the last year and a half or so. Now, it's nowhere near what it was. Some of you are going to be hearing the name and go, what? That thing? Like, I heard it sucks now. It did. They did change it to more of a 3D game, and that's where the game dropped off, and there was almost no one playing it. But RuneScape has since gone back and relaunched the 2007 version, the game that had the most popular players, and it's actually back up to around like 200,000 people average, I think, on at a time. But the reason why I mention it is that is a free game for an MMO that now is on mobile as well. So especially with being stuck at home right now and being on your phones more, it's now on the mobile devices as well. But that game is enough where, yes, you can pay for it, and I think it's like $7 a month, which is like half the cost of a modern MMO. But not only that, the free version, I don't know if you ever played it, but the free version has more than enough to occupy you. That's why I just wanted to say it is that the tip of the week is to just, I will post a link as well, of course, when this episode launches, but the tip of the week this week is on the MMO RPG RuneScape is just something, especially with being stuck at home and having a lot more free time. If the thought of getting into an MMO like World of Warcraft or Star Wars is just too expensive, or you feel like that the free version of those games is going to be too restrictive, which can be a problem. This is a middle ground to get your feet wet in an MMO, not have to put any money into it, but still get that mentality of what these games tend to be. So
hashtag not sponsored.
Yeah, hashtag not sponsored. Not yet. Oh man, maybe I can. Maybe Jagex, if you want to hear this episode and throw some money my way, I can start off every episode by saying sponsored by RuneScape. I have no problem with that. But again, everyone, definitely appreciate everyone turning in to this episode of the Fandom Effect. Dungeon Master Mark Squared here, which we never really got into, but
yeah, that's true. We have the same first name.
Yeah,
That's
so
never
actually,
fun
this
to
brings it
crack.
up. So we have some amazing guests lined up. It's actually pretty crazy. Whereas the first month and a half of doing this, trying to get guests, we actually are actually fully booked for the month of May. We might actually have a guest each week. It's pretty amazing. I'm really excited for you guys. So please stay tuned to everything. Always make sure to keep following on the SoundCloud, YouTube, and the Apple Podcast as well. I'm currently working on getting Google Play Podcasts up as well for those of you like myself that are on Android devices. But of course, the biggest thank you this week is going to go to my good friend here, the Dungeon Master Mark. Definitely appreciate you coming on and kind of sharing your story here.
No problem. It was super fun and went by really quick. I didn't even get into so much stuff like this. I can talk for like 3 more hours about this stuff.
Yeah, and definitely plan on having you on again as a guest in the future if you're willing to, just because, like you said, there's just so much to talk about and so much to go over.
Yeah, and like we plug my Twitter, at Casman2007. And if anyone has any specific questions for me about DMing or Dungeons and Dragons or how to get into it, I can offer any insight I want. It's an amazingly incredible experience that I want as many people as possible to be able to try.
And yeah, so I definitely encourage everyone out there. He's got way more experience with dungeon mastering. Of course, everyone can always reach out to me with regardless of anything, any questions or anything like that. But definitely make sure if you have any questions on being a dungeon master, or perhaps if there's a rule that you want to homebrew, you have an idea about, definitely reach out to the Twitter, which will be posted when this episode drops. So definitely encourage you guys to go out there. Always encourage you guys to keep tuning into the Fandom Effect. Always encourage you guys, have fun, stay safe, keep being who you are, keep being nerdy, keep being geeky, and just always keep pushing forward. Like you said, one foot in front of the other. We're all in this together. I think our community's definitely just the greatest. Obviously there's different things, but you guys are always the greatest. So I'm really happy to be with you guys and give you guys this episode. So you guys have a good day. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Fandom Effect. Please make sure to follow me on all available platforms, Facebook, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts. And if you or yourself or knows anyone that's perhaps interested in being a guest on the Fandom Effect, please feel free to let me know, and I would love to talk to you guys. So I will see you guys on the very next episode of the Fandom Effect.